Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Erasmus Expeditions. This is session episode, whatever you want to call it, 5 in the Help Action series, part of the Life by the Square Inch series here on the channel, where we have a guest on and we take a particular topic. We do one part interview, one part Q&A, one part discussion with the topic that we have chosen. And I am super duper excited to have my guest on tonight to talk about exploration. This is someone that I have not had the honor to play with yet or to run a game for yet. So this is kind of our first real interaction, and I'm looking very much forward to seeing how this is going, how this is going to go. So DBJ, you son of a bitch, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. Hopefully my picture is toggling a little bit for people to see me. I'm not sure if it's coming through that way. But yeah, I am DBJ for those who don't know. Davae Breon Jaxon. I have my own YouTube channel, RPG with DBJ. I go live daily, Monday through Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you live on the Golden Coast, like I am up at the crack ass of dawn, man, and doing it Monday through Friday, and just loving RPGs and trying to help out the community. And oh, by the way, there was an empty spot for the third pillars position, so I am the self-appointed third pillars of the RPG community as well. I dare someone to unseat me.
I would say it's unquestionable. As a matter of fact, that's kind of why you're on the show talking about this particular topic. Exploration and the environment definitely go hand in hand with each other. Awesome. Well, hopefully you're not sad that you're missing out on the Super Bowl. Hopefully I'm not keeping you from it. I didn't even realize that it was a Super Bowl whenever I scheduled all this. I don't know how much you sports ball, but
No, my wife wears the pants in the family when it comes to sports.
Fair enough. Awesome. Well, I guess we could go ahead and kick off with some of our questions.
Absolutely.
I know which one I'm going to do first. One of the first ones that I like to ask people in the hobby is, where did you start with this weird and wild pastime of ours?
Mine came about rather through a rather mundane method. I learned it in school. It was a lifesaver for me. I always had a creative spark, but I hated reading. I got bored in school quite easily. And I had a teacher that would do something called creative dramatics on Fridays. Essentially, she liked to put a little alcohol in the bottom of her coffee cup and not teach anything. So, and we know it. Plus she wore these like sundresses that button down the front and they had a little snaps on it. So she'd sit on the side of her desk and her like calves really stuck out. Oh man. Anyway, back to the point. You could bring in like just about anything as long as it was creative. People could get involved in it. One day we had a class where we had to write instructions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. If you were an alien, and we had to write the instructions down, and then other members around the classroom had to create the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches strictly according to what was written. So one guy brought in Redbox Dungeons and Dragons, and at the time we kind of knew about the satanic panic, but kid introduced the game to us. And half the class was just like, I'm not into it. And I went up to him and I was like, man, can I borrow that? And he's like, yeah, sure. Took it home and devoured the hell out of it. But I wasn't really a reader. So I needed to understand some of the words. I'm thinking I was 7 or 8. Because 77, 78-ish. So I didn't understand a lot of the words, and my mom was always one like, if you don't understand something, you need to learn on your own. Like school is a great place to learn things, but you need to be creative. You need to push yourself to learn something else. Don't be a passive learner. So I took Dungeons and Dragons books and a dictionary, and I was just like, what the hell does initiative mean? Flip. What does armor class mean, and why is it sometimes spelled with a U? Flip. So after that, like I think I went from like a grade school reading level to the in like 3 or 4 months, like a college level reading level, and my mom was just amazed by it. So that satanic panic stuff, as long as I was like maximizing on my grades, my mom was like, the hell with that. I'll buy you as many books as you need. And I spent 10 years in like Walden Books, B. Dalton's, in the mall. Like she would go to the mall and say, where are you going to go? Video games? Like, nope, I'm going straight to the back of the bookstore. And next to the books where they had all the picture books of the painted picture books of like dragons or like fairy tales and everything. And right underneath, down at the bottom, were like these Dungeons and Dragons books, man. And I would just lay there. And I met a bunch of people. I didn't know who they were. But any kid that went back to that corner was cool with me. And it was like, you're like, you know, you give the little head nod, like, yeah, what's up, man? And we just sit in the back and flip those books open. And during that time, because I predominantly grew up in a mostly African-American community, and it wasn't a cool thing to be a nerd in mid 70s, early 80s, you know, so it was like we were our own little clique, but we had to keep it on a down low. And so I didn't become friends with a lot of kids in my own school. We became a clique of kids from a bunch of different neighborhood schools, and we all knew who role played, and you could almost see them. You knew whose backpack had a book in it the way he walked. You knew somebody who was hiding like a comic book inside of their like notebook or something, and you go up to him and kind of, you know, it was almost like a drug dealer, like, psst, psst, hey, what do you think about dragons, man? And if the dude was just like, man, get away from me, okay, and you leave him alone, right? If somebody was like, what do you mean, red dragons or blue dragons? Yeah, gotcha. Come on, man, come on, you know. And so I had a ton of friends that were just like closet nerds, man. We were blurs before blurs became a thing, and so that was my introduction. Was basically in school by a teacher who liked to get drunk, and a kid who brought the red box. And then ever since then, like my mom would purchase me like Dungeons and Dragons books for like Christmas, birthdays. And I had a huge collection. I don't have them anymore, but those specific books, which I'm sad about, but it taught me everything. I love it.
That's amazing, man. That's probably the single best answer I've ever heard anybody give about their introduction to the hobby, period. That's amazing. And I had a lot of the same kind of situations as you. I didn't learn until I was much older to play. I learned in the Boy Scouts, actually, and the same kind of thing. You know, I was an avid D&D player and a Boy Scout at the same time. Luckily, I had a girlfriend already because that was like a double strike against you. And I was also in band for my freshman year. So, but yeah, you find when you're the kind of person that nobody really wants to talk to, there's a lot of you that kind of congregate towards the edges. And then, yeah, you kind of find one another and you form your own little groups. Some of those friends are still good friends of mine.
That's awesome. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to remain close friends with my gaming group. I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and then I moved out to Columbus, Ohio, like in 2000 or so, and I had lost contact with them. But we were a group called Page, Philadelphia area gaming enthusiasts, and we were really proud of that name, and gaming in like a VMF. And stuff. So yeah, it was really fun. Yeah, and I see in the chat some people are like, sounds like a good class. It was. We our character classes, there were like 5 of us that played one character, and so the idea behind it was that we would just solve different problems and things. Like if someone had to pick a lock or whatever, we like talk together. That's right. We're gonna try to pick the lock, and you're like, okay. That's how. So we're like 30 people playing a role playing game, but it was. We didn't get very far, but the introduction to it was cool. So every Friday, we basically played Dungeons and Dragons in class. I mean, as long as she knew we were reading, learning things, doing math, like that just sparked my imagination so much. I was like, I gotta learn this math. What is that? Fractions? Shit. Stupid hero system with fractions. Are you crazy? And so, all kinds of games, man. I love it.
Awesome. Yeah, I started as a younger kid looking over the shoulder of people playing the West End Games Star Wars D6 game on a long road trip to go to summer camp one year. And I was like, what is this? And they're just all like sitting around throwing dice and telling this kind of unfolding story. And I'm watching it going, like, this is like a television show that you're like making happen as you're playing. Like, what is this? And they're like, you're young, go away. You don't understand it. So, but I was enamored from that point on, and I found out about Dungeons and Dragons, and I literally just started telling my own stories to the kids and scouts that were more my age. And we were like, okay, you want blue dragon scale armor? Fine. Okay, that's what you found. And you wanted a fire sword? Okay, you found that too. Now, here's what's happening. You're going to go into this camp full of giants, and what do you do? And there was no dice, there was no paper, no books. None of us knew about any of that stuff really. But it was fantastic, and it was something that I chased from that point on.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the D6 Star Wars just because it has a soft spot in my heart. Just that game system, and many of the there were a ton of games that came out in like the mid 80s to early 90s before gaming systems became what they are today, and that was one of them. Mayfair created like I played the hell out of the original Marvel superheroes face rip version, and DC's Mayfair system. Oh, I played the hell out of those. I was a big, huge comic book nerd, buying comic books on the spinners at 7-Eleven. And and so I was a big face rip person. And for you young guys out there, face rip was fighting agility, strength, endurance, reason, intuition, and psyche. Yeah. And the first 4 were your physical health, and the last 3 were like your karma. That was like your luck or something. Anyway, but yeah, I played the hell out of that game. And that kind of as a little segue, that kind of brought me to where I really, really fell in love with the environment. That and movies and television shows. Like I ate up all those B and C level action movies, kung fu flicks. I ate up all that stuff. And so playing the games allowed me to become those, play like in, Jet Li and Fist of Legend, allowed me to be, fighting on the back of 18-wheelers like in the second Matrix movie, like all those things. I love those things, watching what's an older movie, The Rocketeer, and fighting on the top of Zeppelins and stuff like that. Like all those things really sparked my imagination. And so I loved role-playing games because I could become those things. And eventually the two brought together role-playing in the environment for me, because I always game master, or most of the time. And I've said this before, that the people I gamed with, they would pretty much kill all my bad guys. I mean, that was the thing. Everybody wanted to be Wolverine-ish and, Punisher-ish. And, they kill all the bad guys. So I was like, man, how can I? All right, no point in wasting all of my good energy on creating somebody that they're, another Dr. Nasty that wants to take over the moon or whatever. So I had to figure out a way to run games on the fly and still make it interesting. So I'd start having like car accidents on like Golden Gate bridges, and fires, and saving, old ladies and kittens in burning buildings. And then it was fun, but it could end real quick. So I had to come up with complications. Like, okay, well, the school bus is falling off the edge of the bridge. And at the other end, there's a car accident and an oil tanker catches on fire. And there's a ship coming along and the drawbridge can't get up and the ship's about to hit it. Oh, by the way, so it started getting more and more complicated. And it got to the point where the guys would like come up with ideas for me to use as complications for the next game. And eventually started having this laundry list of things in my head that I could just pull out. Like, there's a burning building and one of the floors is about to collapse. And there's smoke and fire, so you might be blinded. You start choking. there's someone screaming behind a door, watch out for the backdrafts, and then there's a helicopter coming by, and the firemen are trying to help you, and one of them is hurt, you need to find them. And then there'd be crimes happening while this is going on. Someone's trying to break into a safe while you're doing this, so it got more and more complicated, and that became like my go-to, using like the props and the locations around what the people were doing. And it eventually just became second nature to me. But I never found a game that really, really drew me into it until I found the game Feng Shui. And a secondary game was called HCAT, Hong Kong Action Theater. But Feng Shui was the game that really, in the rules, codified, and it was just like, listen, you're not supposed to be a boring character, and you're not supposed to perform boring actions. And in the game, you actually get a penalty for describing boring, repetitive actions. One of the things they mention is like, as long as all you're trying to do, if what you're trying to do is simple, your action can be as complicated as you want. So if you want to knock out a bad guy, you can, kick a fire extinguisher off the wall, spin in a kick, do a raven kick, and kick it against the wall, and it bounces, and then hits the bad guy in the back of the head, and then I take his hand and slam it into a drawer, and then you could come up with it. The whole point was to come up with all these fun and descriptive and strange and cinematic things to do, as long as the end result was just something simple, you're knocking the guy out, or you're killing him. And so we had a ton of fun doing that, but still it was like, oh, it's good, and I loved doing that, but it still was something, I was missing something in like the mechanics to grab onto. So eventually I had this idea, and I ended up contacting Critical Hit Publishing, Alex and Rob. They run Critical Hit Publishing. I was like, listen, I got this idea, and I don't know how to sell it to you guys, so if you can give me 5 minutes, let me go for it. And then that's when I came up with the cinematic environs, and then from that point on, it just took off. So still working on it, but that's where I am today. All right, I'm done.
And it's an awesome place to be, man. Like the stuff you put out is very, very insightful, and it's eye-opening in a lot of ways, honestly. Like I said, there's when DBJ opens school, like, you're going to learn something. You are a fantastic teacher, and it's amazing to watch somebody who has such a depth of knowledge be able to impart that knowledge in a way that is easily digestible. It's not something that a lot of people have a talent for, I think. So it's awesome to watch somebody who has figured that out, and then dispenses it like Pez. All right. So you kind of touched on this a little bit. An often neglected tool that I've noticed is describing the environment in which a given combat is taking place, kind of while the combat is happening. What are some tricks that you can use to interject the environment into the middle of a combat?
Well, usually I like to foreshadow. And foreshadowing is a pretty simple tool, literary tool, basically. And a foreshadow, whether it's used with movies or television or something, you'll either get some kind of representation of something yet to come. And it is a very simple tool. For example, let's take a warehouse. Characters enter in a warehouse, and there are meat hooks hanging around. If there's a close-up of a meat hook, it's going to be used later on. Next 5 minutes, next half hour, end of the movie, doesn't matter. You see a meat hook, it's getting used, right? I believe it's also Chekhov's gun, right? Yep. It is show what might happen, and then later on it pays off. So usually I foreshadow. A storm is coming. You get off the ship, and the storm-tossed waves are washing over the docks, and people are closing windows and shutters and such. So there's a there's a hint of wind, and on a horizon you see dark clouds rolling or something. So I like to foreshadow a number of those things, and then NPCs or the world will start bumping up against things so that I can use them later. You see dark shadows in the back alleys, and you swear you hear a cat scurrying across a rooftop. Later on, I might have a rooftop chase, right? I'll try to give little hints, and it's not that they'll always be used, but it gives me an out so that if I use it, it's not a surprise.
It doesn't feel contrived.
Right, very much so. One of my problems with classic Dungeons and Dragons and traps are they tend to be gotchas, right? Oh, you missed a pit, you fall in the pit, and then it's like, well, if they don't roll for it and they get hit by the pit, it's like, you're kind of being an asshole, right? As a DM, it's just like, oh, you didn't tell me you were looking for a pit. It's like, whatever, right? And then if they find the pit and go around it, then it's like, it becomes anticlimactic. It's like, wow, I made this dungeon with traps in it, and they can see them all. Dun, 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 whatever. So, but by making it very organic, I believe it's far easier to have the environment impact the PCs when it's an organic thing. If you tell the PCs there's a storm coming, and then it starts to rain, and then the streets get muddy, and then it starts to downpour, and then they hear lightning and thunder, and then a bolt of lightning strikes the top roof or something, it sets it on fire, and okay, so you've already set up this pattern like this. The things are going to get worse. Things are starting to change, and then you start incorporating some of the mechanical modifiers to that. And I've gotten some flack because I'm a big proponent of it. I mean, I've been doing like Third Pillar Thursdays for a while, and some of the flack is, you hear the terms like, oh, you're nerfing my character, right? What do you mean there's fog? My archer has disadvantage on shooting my arrows. That sucks, man. You're nerfing my character. And you hear a lot of that. Or somebody will say, oh, it's more complicated. It's too complicated. And I would challenge you to say, well, fog isn't any more complicated than another creature stat block. Muddy streets aren't any more difficult than taking away one of those trolls that you added into the encounter. Figuring out how to do someone running across rooftops, or climbing over a castle wall, or swimming through a swamp isn't any more difficult than any other rules. It's just exercising a different muscle. And so a lot of times, just because a lot of these rules tend to be spread amongst rule systems, they're usually not codified into one chapter. Some people feel like they don't have the ability to do things, use and abuse the environment, so they don't do it. And with games now having more abilities for the PCs, hey, I'm gaining a level, I've got some extra ability, they tend not to look at what's around them. And then there may be game masters that are not used to players using the things around them. So there's a disconnect on the GM side, and disconnect on the player side. And so therefore, a lot of combats and action takes place on what essentially is a green screen, right? You could, and what I mean by green screen is you could replace the background with anything, but they're still fighting on a flat plane, flat featureless plane. And I would challenge people to say, listen, damage, like causing damage, hitting people, striking something, my barbarian does more damage than you, is one way of solving a problem, but it's not every way of solving a problem. And the environment can really allow people to, share the spotlight, improve things. Hey, maybe your archer isn't any good in thick fog. Oh, well, maybe that means you're going to have to rely on somebody else. Maybe the wizard does a gust of wind spell to get the fog out the way. Maybe you're going to have to sneak around and stab someone in the throat instead. Maybe you aren't maybe this is the one situation where, okay, it's not very effective. But then once the fog lifts and you're in the swamp and now the barbarian can barely move in waist-deep muck, maybe you are the cool person who jumps up in the tree and, you know, starts sniping people, the lizard men that are coming after the barbarian or something, right? There are different ways to have people spotlight and move things around. And I just feel like the rules for it, they actually do exist. But again, they're not in one chapter. I started making a list of where I could find things in different chapters. And I found out that in 5th edition, most of the rules for things like climbing, tight spaces, puzzles, traps, layers, obstacles, skill challenges, they're spread all over the book. And using those different elements, even spells themselves, you can reskin as like natural environmental things. I feel like just combining them together and using them is like that third pillar and can really change how your games operate.
Yeah, I agree. I think you hit on something that I had wanted to bring up, and I think that is that during combat, if you want your players to interact with the environment, then you need to make sure that you have described aspects of the environment, you know, architectural features or geography or whatever, furniture, and make sure that you let them know that it's okay for them to come up with that kind of stuff themselves, and reward people for using the environment instead of just another sword attack. You know, if somebody wants to crash a chandelier down on top of the head of the knights that have come to arrest you, then yes, put a chandelier in there, and then have it do more damage than their sword would, because that's going to be the way that your players are going to look to the environment instead of what's on their character sheet for how to solve something. You know, they're like, yeah, I could do a sword attack, and that does, you know, my normal damage, but, you know, what if I did this thing and it looked really cool?
You know, one complaint I get is someone will say something like, well, if I let the barbarian pick up the table and do like, I don't know, 3d10 damage or something with the table, or gets, you know, 3/4 cover behind the table, they'll do it all the time. And my answer to that is no, because unless there's always a table in every room, everywhere they go, that wouldn't happen. Are you putting tables everywhere? I mean, why would that, you know, like sometimes, sometimes there's this idea that if you let one person do one thing once, it will become a habit. And now, mind you, okay, let's take the table, for example, right? Barbarian says, I want to carry a table around with me. Well, ignoring all the social implications of this dude carrying around his giant ass table, okay, the table can't be, it's not a shield. You might want to say, well, guess what? It can only take about 5 hits. Or, dude, if you once you roll like a 1 or the maximum damage on it, it's going to crush. Or if you roll a 1 or a 20 on your roll to hit, it shatters, right? You can, your DM, you can just say, well, dude, after your 3rd hit, you've got a 22 strength or something with your, you know, your hill giant girdle, it's just going to shatter. Like, you can come up with those things, allow those things to happen, and not limit. All things in the environment do not have to be one-sided. For example, barbarian wants to pick up the table and smash people, and you say, the guy says, player says, I want to use a table and I want to smash 3 goblins at the same time. Well, hell yeah, grab the dice, boom, gets to do it. And then you're like, okay, one of the goblins, you're the DM, throws oil on it and sets it on fire. Do you still want to hold on to the table? You know, we get to do these things, use and abuse the environment too. So the best way about using the environment and getting your players to really engage in it, have your NPCs be the first ones to turn it against them. Let them lock doors. Let them, you know, the kobolds throw boulders off the side of a mountain. Let those things happen, and absolutely foreshadow some things. Maybe they're out in the wilderness and it's like snow-covered mountains or something, and during the PCs are talking to each other, and you say, with your raised voices, you hear the snow crack and the ice shifts and starts to tumble down around your legs, and you realize if your voices are raised, there might be an avalanche. You might want to keep you're not, basically allowing the PCs to have giving them the benefit of the doubt that they are professionals and know what the end result of their abilities are. Hey, you're a badass rogue. Dude, if you swing on the chandelier, you could probably just swing over their heads to get the hell out the room. Your character knows this thing already. You know to slide under the table, to between their legs, because they're like, you would know that. And I would just give them those abilities, even if it's not necessarily stat wise, but skill wise. A fighter that drunkenly stumbles out of a bar and is surrounded by 3 thugs, but he's like a 10th level fighter. They'd be like, yeah, you don't have your sword on you, but these 3 thugs surround you, and even on your worst day, you could probably take these guys out, right? Give them that knowledge, and so that your player characters can trust you as a game master, and it doesn't seem like you're setting them up for failure by setting up the world around them as one big hazardous thing that they can't get out of. Give them some gimmies, push them a little bit towards using the environment. And I think they'll latch onto it.
I agree. I'm a huge fan of GM trust. It's kind of one of those things where the players need to understand that even though I am an adversary in most of the encounters, that I really am rooting for you, that I want you to succeed as players. And I'm just going to push you to the brink of what I think the threshold is, and make you feel like, oh, maybe we're not actually going to make it out of this. Maybe there's not a way to figure this out. But usually I'm rooting for you to do so. So like a little bit of trust ends up going a long way, because then I can let you bend and break the rules without worrying about it becoming an issue later on.
Yeah. What I'm trying to promote in the RPG community is basically thinking outside the box. Every situation may not be solvable by just looking down at your character sheet and looking at your stat bonuses or something. And sometimes when I start talking about using the 3rd pillar of exploration, I do get the well, if I did a whole video on this. I'm sorry to diverge slightly. I did a whole video on how to stop spellcasters. There's when there's frostbite out, can you use your fingers? Are they frozen? When you're climbing, are your hands? Can you really both hold up an arcane focus and grab your material components and hold a weapon and hold onto a rope on a steep hill when you're climbing? Really? Loud noises. Can you cast a spell underwater? If you can't verbalize or something. If your hands are tied, if you can't see, in fog, there's a limitation on a number of spells that says targets you can see. If you're in fog or smoke or in darkness or confused or tapestry or cloak got thrown over your head, can you see your allies to use that bless spell? Right. So I came up with a number of these things, and a lot of the hate was like, well, you're just trying to nerf the thing. And I'm like, no, my point is to create obstacles and then figure cool ways out of them. Maybe that means you need to rely on your allies, i.e. other player characters, because it's not just about you, and it's not about me trying to kill you. It is, sure, at this particular time, your PC is in danger and may not be may not perform optimally. But on the other hand, you do have allies. Why don't you count on them? Or maybe you are just frustrated because now you're in a situation where maybe your PC you have to make a tough decision. And making tough decisions can put us, sometimes we feel like we're backpedaling, we're pushed on our heels, and we feel defensive about it. But if your DM or GM is a person you can trust, what they're just doing is creating obstacles and situations and challenges for you, and there is no right answer. There isn't one. It is dealing with the situation. Sure, maybe your archer isn't very good in the fog. But if you run into the tavern and someone else lures the enemies into the tavern, maybe you are that way. And so maybe you need to communicate with the people around you and share that spotlight by calling on the other player characters who are better at dealing with the situation. And then I think you can really tell really good stories that way.
I cannot agree more. I think the most interesting parts of role-playing games and the stories that they tell are the points when the heroes are being challenged, when the players are being challenged even. That's why I sometimes will go ahead and use a puzzle, because sometimes I want to challenge the actual players, not just the characters. It also, I have noticed that when you challenge the players, and then go back to challenging their characters, they come at problems from a different angle. They don't just rely on, their damage resistance and the maul that they wield that deals a bunch of damage. Because they've done something else in character, even though they were solving it as a player, that image or that information tends to kind of transfer back, which is a fantastic thing to watch, I found.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And really, I mean, this has been said many times, but especially the AbTab guy said, Tim, create problems, not solutions. And in essence, you really want to create problems for them. You come across a frozen lake, and when you step upon it, a great crack ripples across it, and you realize every footstep you take may be your last, but behind you are the winter wolves and the hunter that controls them. What are you going to do, right? So me as a game master, this is strange to say, I don't care what they do, right? I'm creating the problem, and I'm going to be a fan of any decision they make. Well, we need to run around the lake. I'll tell them, okay, well, it's going to take you 3 times as long to run around the lake. If you can get across the lake safely, it might be okay. Now, of course, in their minds, they're going, okay, ice, slippery, cracking ice, we might drown. We might fall into the water, frostbite, and we're being chased by something that's adapted to this environment. Oh man, what can happen? Now, let's take that same situation and how I describe that, right? You're being chased by hounds and there's a frozen lake in front of you and a big crack goes across the lake as you step upon it or whatever. If I instead said, hey guys, I created this adventure and there are 87 grease spells. There are there's maybe 27 hold person spells. And by the way, I also made 52 pit traps. What do you think? Is that a good adventure? And everyone's going to say, help, F you, dude. What? Please don't come back to our community. But if you flavor it as a frozen lake in the middle of a blizzard, right? It has a different feel to it. It's far more organic. It's something that is in the environment that you don't have to sell to your players, that every step they take, they could slip and fall if they start making a run for it. Or if they fall into the water, the water's so cold, their extremities start to freeze and their heart, could stop in their chest and someone has to try to grab them as they flow under the ice, the icy frigid river as the PC above them sees them knocking against the thin ice or something. Like those images in my head are like, I'm going to make it so that those things can happen. Those very cinematic things can happen without me spoiling the action with being too deep in the woods when it comes to the rules and regulations of the rule system. And what I mean, it's not ignoring the rules, but not getting so deep that the best thing would just be, I'm just going to hit it with my sword again, right? I think too often we don't associate skills and skill challenges with the same importance and intensity as hitting something with a sword. Even though we're doing the same thing, we're rolling a d20, adding or subtracting some modifiers, and having a result, a skill challenge should have the same impact. Not necessarily same damage output, but it should have the same effectiveness. So, for example, if a fighter can hit, I don't know, the troll 3 times and kill it, then maybe the bard who's trying to sneak up into the the rocky hills to make an avalanche and has to take 3 skill attempts to do so, should have just as much impact as that fighter trying to hit that troll 3 times. And too often we institute a skill challenge, and our mindset is it's a problem as opposed to it being a solution to something. So my feeling is we should change our mindset, change that mental muscle. And if you're going to, if you really want to instill skill or skill challenges in the game, have them mean something. Have some kind of impact. Maybe not this round or the next round or this combat or something, but have it mean something later on, where they can find a solution to the problem. The character that is able to create a landslide that blocks off the 13 gnolls that are trying to rush towards you and block them off temporarily may be more effective than the barbarian who's killing them one at a time in one hit, right? It's about effectiveness, and using the environment, allowing the PCs to get away with it, and then having the NPCs try to do the same thing to them.
And I think the interesting thing about environmental encounters is that there isn't an adversary to attack. There isn't a place to direct your anger, your frustration, and even your weapon attacks. Your weapons may not do you any good whatsoever. And a large portion of Dungeons and Dragons, especially, is focused around combat. So there's a lot of people that tend to kind of have that be their first and sometimes even only answer to a situation. But when you present them with an environmental challenge, then they're having to look at the rest of their character sheet and go, okay, I don't know. I took all attack spells, so I don't know. Oh, there's that one other spell that I had to pick because I had one more to pick and I didn't have any other better choice, but now I get to use it. And sometimes that's, the really ingenious solution that you need in the situation to get everybody out. So it's a good idea to challenge your players in a situation where they can't just hack it to pieces a few hit points at a time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I also feel like the idea that there are stats that are, dump stats or dead skills, things that are useless spells that have no meaning. I feel it's not because of the game, it's because we're not utilizing things to have them use those skills or what have you. So an example would be someone trips and falls and they're in a mountainous or forest wilderness and they trip and fall and they break their ankle, right? So the easy answer would be, well, I'll heal it, use my spells and regain hit points or something. You as a game master could say, or dungeon master could say, okay, you can heal the hit points. You still have a broken ankle, right? You don't feel anything. There's no pain, but your movement is halved until you can set your broken ankle. You need to make a medicine check. And it's like, and then now of course you should have these discussions in session 0, but if you tell a player that, yes, you can heal the hit points, but you need to take certain precautions to alleviate the side effects of being hurt or tired or injured or suffocating or drowning or broken ribs or allergic reaction to messing with the poison ivy or something like that, and having those things happen in the game, I think also will instill in the players to consider what they're doing, allow them to make the hard choices, whether they proceed in one direction or another, and then reward them if they come up with a great idea, like soaking a bandana in water so they can go through the forest that's on fire and they're choking from the smoke or something, or leading enemies in deeper into danger and then forcing them to have to deal with it while the PCs make a run for it. That's just my thing. And let's be clear, the environment doesn't necessarily have to be natural. Urban environments, ancient tombs are environments. Anywhere you can have a conflict of any type is the environment. It doesn't necessarily have to be jungles or deserts or Arctic regions or coastal, beaches or something like that. Although I love using those things, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way.
Yeah. It's very true. It's a matter of just kind of reskinning in even rooms that you pull from a module or someplace else, a location where something else happens. It's very, very easy to reskin it into a different environment that suits your story better. But one of the things that I wanted to make sure to get to with you, I'm really interested to hear your answer on this. You mentioned when you grew up that you mainly grew up in an African American community. Now, you and I both are of an age that we kind of come on the back end of the civil rights movement, and I think that saw, unfortunately, racial diversity and inequality kind of become a topic that was not publicly discussed very often. Now, however, it is a very frequent topic of conversation, especially in the media, and whether it's discussed in a healthy way or not. Um, what visible changes have you noticed, if any at all, within the gaming community itself and the culture that surrounds gaming, specifically that addresses racial diversity?
Well, strangely, it amuses me how triggered people are today when the same things or more happened actually more often, I feel, in our past, and it really wasn't a big thing. And I think just social media lets people scream louder than I think they normally would. And so, and your social media, pretty much you can't be heard unless you're really loud. And I of course, I don't mean audibly. I'm saying like the most flagrant uses of social media tend to get the most attention. And so when it comes to like gaming, I'll give you a perfect example. Pathfinder many, many years ago put out a statement about wanting to be more inclusive with their artwork. And I'll compare this to a number of different situations. In the comic book industry, they wrote a comic book series about the first Captain America. It was called Red, White, and Black, and it was about it was a parallel of the Tuskegee experiment. And the first Captain America was a black gentleman that suffered like mental disability from the super soldier serum before it was used on Captain America. There was a situation where, of course, WotC said they want to be more inclusive with their artwork for, the stupid non-sexualized females, more culturally diverse characters and things. And usually what ends up happening is some company or some person will put out a statement and say, we want to be more diverse with something. And then we hear this big outcry of like, oh, why do I need to hear this? Why do I have to be part of this? Why? Okay. I don't think it's necessary, etc. And I sit back because most people don't know what I look like. I don't know who I am. And I sit back and I'm going like, are you a bunch of assholes? Like you're not going to allow me one extra picture in a book, right? I can't have one movie. Marvel had 17 movies. I can't have one about a character that's just as old as every other character. Are you that like, are you that insecure? Really? Like you're bitching, oh, I can't believe there's a female lead. They're SJW. And I'm going, I have a laundry list of action movies. They're all dudes. And guess what? I enjoyed all those. But I don't mind change, not even change. I guess I'm just not, I'm not so arrogant and so narcissistic that I think people have to look and sound like me. There's already one of me. I think that's enough in the world. I don't need a reflection of myself and the things that I believe in and say, I want to see differences. And so for me, I've always seen people who didn't represent me in mass media, whether it comes to role-playing games, comic books, graphic novels, movies, all those things. And so when I finally get to see someone or something that kind of resembles my background, my culture, or my genetic makeup, I'm like, oh, sweet. That's cool. because I want to get to the point where I'm just like, it doesn't matter anymore. And it isn't quite at that point. Because like in Pathfinder, when Pathfinder, people don't remember when Pathfinder first put their book out, and the paladin had the black woman with her cornrowed hair back and stuff, and there was an outcry. Now you'll never, all those people that bitched and moaned about that could care less now, and you won't find those people. They won't admit to it. And does anybody really care? No. It was cool artwork. Dwayne, I can't remember his last name. Did a lot of that artwork for Pathfinder that became iconic for it, and we love it now, right? You do a Google search and all that artwork comes up, and everyone's like, "Sweet, that's what my character looks like. That's who I want to play." I don't understand why someone doesn't want me to have a photo, a picture, a reference. Like, wow, like you really can't even give me that. Now, that being said, I haven't really had that much harm blown my way being like a YouTuber in the RPG community at all. I believe because most people that I associate with are brilliant and open-minded and could care less. If they didn't like me, they just turn me off, which is perfectly fine with me. If they do want to associate with me or make a comment or come to my channel or see what I have to say, then it's all hugs and it's all embraces. Those that have something negative to say, I haven't really had to deal with that, and I'm thankful for it. It's going to get there. It's going to get there. I'm starting to get more subscribers now, and more people are starting to know who the hell is this DBJ guy. And I'm sure one or two people will poke their ugly head out there, and then we'll play a little whack-a-mole and knock them down back into their places. And I'm like, okay, whatever, grow up. Like you play role-playing games for a living. Look, really, you're a geek just like me. Like let's not kid ourselves that somebody's better than someone else, right? We're all floating around in infinite worlds in our heads, and that's where we want to have our fun. That's our playground. So like, don't take my football.
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, it's one of those things where if you are into playing these kinds of games and going to these strange worlds and different lands and cultures, how in the world could you have any issue with somebody looking and sounding and acting different than you? Like, that's part of the whole purpose in what we're doing. And so like, I love finding a new culture or developing a new culture in one of my worlds and kind of figuring out how they look different and why, maybe, and I enjoy playing characters from all kinds of different cultures and really playing up the culture that they're based on and trying to find things about them that translates into usually, a fantasy game, and highlighting those things, not in a way of like picking on a race or being like stereotypical or anything like that. I truly find these things really fascinating and interesting, and I'm a big believer in using tropes and then kind of twisting them. So I love doing that with characters.
Oh hell yeah! I think one of the most salacious videos I did was something labeled like "Please be a racist," and then I in parentheses in your RPGs, and it was basically like saying like, okay, listen. We have tropes, we have stereotypes, we have archetypes. Stuff. Use them, and then just break them. Right? Don't be afraid to do it. Use them. I mean, hell, in most of my table games, I played a bunch of white guys. Nobody came. There were no police around out to arrest me. Right? Now, you could say as a kid, children can be pretty brutal when it comes to being kind to stereotypes. And we get older and we look back and we go, damn, I was an asshole, man, I was so stupid, like why did I do those things? But you see, in role-playing games, if you open yourself up to them, to new ideas, to new cultures, to someone that says, hey, I want to play an Arabian, a game in like Persia, Arabia, with like jinn and efreets and scimitars and you're like, oh wow, really? Yeah, I want to play those things. And by the way, what was it? Al-Qadim is it may not be a number one, but it's like a top 5 setting. behind like Dark Sun and Eberron, maybe Spelljammer. El Kadim is up there. Maybe you got some Planescapers out there as well. I see you Planescaper converts out there. So okay, El Kadim and Oriental Adventures, which a lot of people say is pretty borderline racist, but we're like, okay, it was a first step, right? You screwed up, first step, we'll go back. Then we got L5R, right? Legend of Five Rings. Once we got Legend of Five Rings, everyone's like, there you go, slow clap. Now we can start playing, right? So it's okay to take a first step and then trip and fall. We've all done that in history. We do that in role-playing games. You trip and fall, no big deal. Here's a hand, I'll help you back up. Let's go back at this again. And then let's get into play. I'm looking at the chat, seeing everyone there. Scott Poe joins me sometimes on my for my thing. It's very early, even earlier for Scott. So he's out of Arizona. It's crazy early. But anyway, that being said, yeah, I'm not. We all come from different. We are products of our environment. And I just feel like I could bring something else to the table. And then when I meet other people, I like to know what they bring to the table. And we can, bring things in, mix it together, come up with some new ideas, and just grow off of it. There is no wasted individual. The most important resource we have in the world are people. One of those people is going to find cures for diseases we don't like. And if we, so getting out of that part, in role-playing games, I love people too. The ideas they bring, the creativity they bring. And that's why I lurk so heavily. I'm just like, oh man, somebody came up with this great idea, and I've got to stew over it all day at work for the next day to have somebody else once again come up with a great idea, where they find a piece of artwork, a new world. I know you tend to have dueling worlds, and it's probably because you'll have an idea, but it won't fit into this one world. So, but maybe it'll fit into this other world. And so that's why world creators tend to have multiple worlds going on at the same time in their head, because a great idea, okay, it may not be useful now or in this setting, but I can use it for something else, So yeah, absolutely. I love people, the ideas they come up with, and I'm just hoping to spark some new ideas using that that's cinematic environment kind of thing, man.
Yeah, and like I said, I can't think of anybody who does it better. I'm a big fan of trying to use the environment and the exploration of the environment and things of that all kind of fit into that aspect of the game. I really enjoy trying to find places to work that in, because I tend to run very cinematic games anyways. And I like really big action, bombastic combats. But one of the best ways to do that is to find the perfect playground to put it all in. And the environment is a massive part of that. It informs it, and what they choose to do can end up shaping it. And it's a part that I think sadly a lot of people do miss out on putting in their games. Yeah. And you're a prophet.
Thanks. And sometimes we can start out small when it comes to using the environment, right? Start just a little bit. Start out small, okay? Do something that's static, right? Where it doesn't require too many die rolls, doesn't require you to monitor anything. Do something static. Static like fog, okay? Beyond a certain distance, it's like disadvantage or you're blind or something, right? Static would be like causing some sort of like disadvantage when some element is met. For example, using like the fog, for example. But oftentimes, if you make something static, it can feel like you're punishing people, right? And of course, it's not very dynamic. So then let's go back, because if it wasn't for role-playing games, I'd be a movie critic or a movie buff. I love movies. I love how they're made, and I love the end results. And if you take a look, at some of your greatest adventure movies, and even some of the stupid ones, some really bad movies have really great concepts in them. Jumper comes to mind, a terrible movie. And I actually ran a Jumper game. I ran a rules light Jumper game. It was really cool. Anyway, okay. The point being is that let's take a look at Lord of the Rings. Okay, there's the first Lord of the Rings movie, Fellowship of the Ring. They go down a set of stairs, and for some reason, dwarves don't know how to buy handrails. I don't know where they lost that skill, but okay. Apparently, it goes all the way into the far future because damn, they cheapened on in the Death Star with handrails too. But whatever, I don't know where their mind comes from. That being said, right, they start going down the stairs, and what's in the stairs? There's a gap, right? That's what we call a skill challenge. Let's jump over the gap, okay? We get to another gap, and it's a little bit longer. All right, maybe we're going to have to throw a hobbit or two across this gap. What ends up happening? They get across the gap, and there's like, I believe they were goblins, wall-crawling goblins, either throwing javelins or shooting arrows or something, right? Okay, so now we just complicated it even further, right? And so now they're going down the stairs, they're being shot at, the gaps are getting wider, and then what ends up happening? They're on a, I guess you call it like a pillar of sorts because the steps start to crumble aside, and now they have to shift their weight and time the movement of the steps, and then it falls forward, and they just jump off and step off the steps while the steps crumble behind them in the pillar, and they make their way out of it. That's what I'm talking about. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Because I'm sure, I know it's not a real role-playing game, but I'm just saying, we're describing it that way, right? Who wants to be the halfling that gets thrown over to the elf on the other side, right? Someone's going to come up with that in the game. And I'd be sitting back as a game master like, yes, I'd be smiling, grinning like, I don't know, can you throw him? Sure, go for it. You know, it's those types of things where you just use a little bit and you just start ramping it up. You ramp it up. I was about to say Runehammer, ICRPG. The literally spelled ICRPG, the index card RPG. In it, he has a rule. It's a real simple rule, right? It's add pressure. A lot of times when we use the environment, one of the things we forget about doing is creating pressure, tension, force, that thing to push people to really get rid of that analysis paralysis. To get rid of that, you need to add some pressure. So in ICRPG, there's a very simple rule. Take a die, preferably a D4, roll it, leave it on the table, start counting down. You don't even need to tell the players what you're counting down for, right? It would be a good idea to do that, foreshadow a little bit, but even if it's a foreshadow that's not even something physical, you're in a dark room and the shadows seem to creep around you. You feel a tension. You feel like a cold finger on your back. You don't know why. Maybe you might want to, pick up the pace or something. Like, you can even just make it a feeling, and you just start counting down. You roll a 3, and you're like, okay, 3. Everyone's like, why'd you say 3? Don't worry about it. They do a couple more things. Okay, 2. Boom, you hit 1. Okay, and then have this thing happen to push the action forward. Do you want to go across that frozen lake? Do you want to, I don't know, go through the desert mountains or whatever, or the jungles, or dive into the ocean or whatever? It's just to push energy forward, create tension, have things start to ramp up if they don't act or react to what's going on, and then let them make the choice. Okay, there's a raging river. How do we want to go across the raging river? One person's like, well, I'll string a rope across and everybody can hold on to it. Cool. Okay. One of you's on one side of the river. 3 of you are holding on to the rope. Somebody else is on the other side of the river, and the bad guys show up. Now what? Right? You added in a timer. Okay. Do you rush across? Maybe someone lets go of the rope. Maybe someone gets hurt and slips away from the rope, and then they start getting pulled away by the river. Do you go after them? Do you shoot at the enemies again? What decision do you make? Come on. Quick. What are you going to do? To me, that is what really starts to ramp up the energy. And not that I would specifically give PCs like you've got 30 seconds or I'm taking your action away. I would really never do that. But I want them to feel like I would, right? Oh, I'll put on a stone face and be like, listen, you got 30 seconds. You better make a decision now. I would never really do it, even though maybe I'm giving that secret away. But I want them to feel like I'm gonna kick your ass if you don't make a decision. Make one right now. And then if whatever decision they make, now I'm their fan. I could care less. Are you going to reach down and grab the dwarf's hand as getting pulled away by the raging river? Okay, I'm your fan. Go for it. Or instead, are you going to ignore him, hoping that he survives, and then you're going to shoot your arrows across the river at the enemies? Fine, cool, go for it. Grab the dice. Try to kill him. I want to be a fan of the players when they're trying to do something, and then when it's my turn, oh man, I get to move the world around them. So yeah, be dynamic.
Timed events are one of my favorite things to call back on every once in a while. I had a trap that basically sent out a certain number of damage every 30 seconds. I set a timer on my phone, and I was like, okay, this puzzle is what you guys need to solve to get out of this situation. And it literally was just a cipher puzzle, very simple. I had the answer that I gave to them, but I broke the answer and the riddle up into pieces, and it was scattered across the table to different players. I said, now you each have a piece, and you have to solve this cipher in order to get out of this situation. I'm starting the timer now. And every 30 seconds, I rolled damage, and I said, this is how much damage you all take. And every 30 seconds. It started at like a minute, and then it got steadily faster and faster, I think down to 30 seconds. And by the end of that, every single player was on their feet, out of their chairs, and were leaning over the table, like pushing their scraps together and trying to, no, it can't be that. It's got to be this. They were immediately eating out of the palm of my hand in that moment.
Yeah.
Like they were in that game, and there was nothing else in the entire world going on around them that mattered more than solving that puzzle. And it was amazing.
Yep. I mean, there's nothing. The one thing that it is just a pet peeve of playing online. The one thing that just annoys me about playing online is I can't get up and walk around. I'm a very body language kind of person. I like to get up and stand up and put my hands on a table and walk around and pace. And I love to do that. And so it annoys me a little bit that I can't generate that kind of energy sitting down. I would love to have a camera that could like a drone camera that could follow me a little bit. I do videos and role play and whatnot, a game master and whatnot. But that being said, I love the idea of just, I love that energy where the PCs are just, they are consumed with trying to solve a problem any way they can. And they're worried about not being able to do it on time. Who's going to be bait for something while we do this other thing. And it can be really hard as a game master to balance sitting back and letting them go through the problem but letting them dwell on the problem too much, right? And so the hard part is just creating the problem without needing a specific solution or giving them the solution and giving them the time and resources they need to solve it without just punishing them outright. Now, punishment doesn't necessarily mean death. I know that's one hot topic that comes up many times in role-playing games. It's just like, well, the game's not fun unless there's a chance of dying. And my feeling is there's 50 other things in between being alive and dead that are far more horrific and more story creating than dying. Everything from being cursed or diseased or broken bones to having your reputation stolen or being captured or enslaved or charged with a crime or what. There's so many different things involved. Losing your memory, having a reoccurring nightmare, being hunted over and over again, reliving the same day. You could come up with so many weird off-the-wall complications to what people do or can do in a game, and then having them try to figure their way out of it, then killing off a PC, which just basically that's a shruggable thing because the story ends. There's nothing more to tell. Great, your character's dead, and either you've just kicked out somebody, either I mean, do they join in the game again? Then why not just have them play the same character and change the name on it? You want them to make another character, and then you go through now we got to reinsert them into the game, and then there's some tables that are like, oh, they have to start so many levels behind. That creates its own problems and complications and stuff. It's like, well, I would rather deal with problems and conflicts and complications of failure rather than death, because I think you can tell far more stories with that. And so using the environment to tell those stories can be a thing as well, in terms of when it comes to, say, action movies. Sometimes the setting, the backdrop itself can be a big story, like having a fight on a pirate ship, right? It's the swinging from the ropes and having a fight up in the crow's nest and having a storm sweep over the deck and sweeping some of the crew away, and another PC falls down and the bad guy grabs on a rope and someone goes overboard, but their ankle gets wrapped in the rope and now they're hanging over the side, and then there's fights happening below deck. And all of that can really, really culminate into a big conflict if you wanted to have this conflict with, say, I don't know, a pirate ghost or something, right? It's not just a pirate ghost, but it's where he's at. He's on this ship, and the storm comes in, and everyone's just like, we need to get out of the storm, but we're also involved in this fight. Do we stop the fight to say, hey, let's work together to get out of the storm? What's going to happen? Oh, I guess we're not going to talk about it. I guess we are going to fight. And here comes the storm. Damn it. Okay, well, I guess this is what's going to happen. And are those tentacles coming out the ocean? I don't want to get pulled down in the water. You know what I mean? And even using game systems themselves, it's not sharks that are scary. It's being bitten by a shark underwater that's scary, right? It's the I'm bit, I can't breathe, I don't have leverage, and I'm being pulled deep under the ocean. Hell no, right? It's not just the alligator that you're fighting. It's the alligator in the dark, murky waters of a swamp that grabs you and does a barrel roll, right? Barrel rolling you. The alligator bit me and is barrel rolling me in dark waters, and I've got plate mail on and I can't float. Ooh, this isn't good. So it's sometimes, I think, when we overlook the environment, we also overlook the impact it can have that we feel when we're playing the game, the fear, the anxieties that we feel when we're in those situations, and even setting up the situations so that they are as fearful as they should be. The winter yeti that attacks a PC and drags them off in the distance during a blizzard and no one sees where their trail went is a scary thing. And so it's not just, hey, you attacked the yeti, you rolled a hit, he rolls to hit you, you rolled a hit, you roll. No. The yeti grabbed you and dragged you off, and all you see is a bloody trail and then nothing. And the wind's blowing, it's getting cold, and the snow's coming down sideways. What do? And it's like, well, I track him down. Track down what? You can't see him. You don't hear him anymore. The trail ends because it's been covered by snow. What are you going to do, right? I don't know what I'm going to do. And then all of a sudden you hear a howl from a distance from the other side. And you're like, is that another one? Did he circle around? Are we getting picked off one by one? One of my favorite sleeper movies is The Gray. Liam Neeson, The Gray, and all that movie is just plane crash in the Arctic wilderness, try to survive. I mean, there's nothing magical about it. There's no special. I mean, yeah, you could say the wolves might have acted a little bit too intelligent, a little bit, but maybe not. I don't know. If you see some nature channels, you could see some of these animals acting in quite tactical manners. That's one of the better ones, action movie wise, and the cinematography on it is excellent as well. Especially the scene where he has a dream about his girlfriend or his wife or something, and he's in bed with her, and there's like a diffused light. It looks very, very ephemeral. Like you can see kind of like the sunlight, and then all of a sudden she gets snatched away. And you realize that the plane's coming down, and he's like half screaming in his chair, and the winter wind is coming through when it happens. It's like that was really good. With the way it was filmed, it was really great. But yeah, all those. Take a look at all those survival movies. Everest. What's another one where they're in the mountains? It's not Terminal Velocity. It's I think it's not Matt Damon, Jerry O'Connell. No, it's there's another movie where they're up in the mountains and they have to save, half the explorers go up in the mountains and they refuse to come down. They're like, we're almost at the peak. Storm blows in. They send up a bunch of people to rescue them, and then hilarity ensues. Right? It's true. There's an old Stallone movie, Cliffhanger. Same thing, right? Cliffhanger going, using the environment again. And et cetera, et cetera. You can go on and on with those things. One of my favorites is see guys. Yeah, sorry, looking at the chat. Gotta go. One of my favorites is the second Matrix movie. The whole highway scene, the whole thing, jumping from cop car to sports car, fighting on top of 18-wheelers. There's nothing slicker than using a katana to slice the back wheel of a SUV and watching it flip through the air and then pulling out your auto pistol and making it explode. It's just like, that's so sweet. As a game master, I would not want to go, well, let's see, that really wouldn't happen. You're going to have to make 16 rolls. It's like, don't kill the energy. That's just so slick. Martial arts fight with razor blades inside of a car. Come on. You got to let that go. Like you got to just like give it the slow clap and go, yeah, we're going to do this. We're really going to do this right now, So yeah, motorcycle riding the opposite way through traffic. Yeah, you got to do that. You got to. Anyway, I digress. I'm sorry.
No,
we do have. Yeah, don't we have questions as well?
I mean, we have a few. There were 2 questions that got posted on the Facebook chat.
Okay.
And then there was also one that got dropped in the YouTube chat here fairly early on, I think by your dude. Scott, I think his name is. Oh no, it was Ben Fisher. He actually just left the chat, but we'll go ahead and drop the question now here anyways.
Okay.
We hear lots about how wilderness travel can present challenges to players. On the flip side, how do you best enhance the wonder and discovery aspects of third pillar activity in your RPGs? So I guess other than wilderness is what he's asking about.
Yep. Well, here's a caveat. 5th edition has created a lot of easy buttons, and an easy button for me is the fact that there are essentially like 1 or 2 sentence things that some players have, player characters have, that makes the struggle rather useless. So here's what I mean. There's a spell called Good Berry. Good Berry heals you a little bit. It's a full meal, right? So sure, you could limit like the components for the spell, but essentially eating becomes a moot point. There's also, I believe it's the outsider background. Hey, I just automatically find food for me and a couple of my friends. The ranger. Hey, I automatically, I don't get lost and I can find food and shelter for me and my friends, right? And while I understand why they did it, you do want those characters to be the ones who are the experts at it. The easy button makes it difficult to present problems that are lasting and that are effective. So that being said, what I'm going to say is, yes, you could use the easy button to fix it. You would just have to have a session 0 and talk about, well, how nitty gritty are we going to get, right? Are we playing Dark Sun where there isn't water? You know, like you need to discuss that with your player characters. How gritty of a setting are we playing? Because if it's going to be very gritty, we're going to have to put some limitations on what abilities we have. You know, can I heal spell us out of danger, or is this something that's going to take time and energy to fix? So that being said, when it comes to wilderness travel and to ramp up the thing, the tension, the danger of it, it should be just as dangerous as you're fighting trolls or orcs or bandits along the road, right? So again, instead of using rolling to hit things and kill it, that's where you use your skills. That's where you use your saving throws. That's where you use your skill challenges to navigate situations. And then failure in navigating those situations, or multiple failures in navigating them, will have some effects, meaning you lose some of your items. Certain individuals get hurt. You lose some of your resources, whether it's food or the items that you're carrying along with you. You damage your shield, or the sword falls into a crevice or something, and to create those complications. Just for the fact of having environmental effects without necessarily having to have a laundry list of combat.
I agree. It's one of those things that it's I just lost what I was going to say. It's a difficult thing for a lot of new people who are running games to put out there, because there's not a hard fast section in the book like you're talking about, for them to access examples of, or because there are so many different things that kind of hand wave a lot of that kind of stuff, because D&D is so focused around combat a lot of the time. But I think there's nothing wrong at all with, if you want that kind of stuff to be important and front and center in your campaign, then add a session 0, which I'm a massive proponent for. Tell your players, hey guys, I know that there's all of these things out there that would get rid of the element of survival, but because of this aspect of the setting, we're going to change that. We're going to change how that works. I'm letting you guys know up front, so that way you don't get caught with your pants down later on and go, I built my character around this entire, principle, and now you're telling me that it's going to be, really difficult to play that. So if you hedge that in a session 0, then they can build their character with that knowledge, and you don't have to take anything away from their characters. And instead, what that usually will do is it enhances their other abilities, because they learn to solve that situation in a creative way, instead of just saying, oh, I get one of those per long rest, so I'm going to do that now.
Yeah, I'm with you on that in terms of, the nature of say 5th edition now is very cinematic. The long rest basically is the reset button that pretty much wipes away the end result of the hard things that they've gone through. After a long rest, it's like, well, we're healed up, we're rested, we're not suffering any drawbacks from that. So that's why I'm a big proponent of like foreshadowing things ahead of time. The storms, the sandstorms, the avalanches, those kind of things, so that when they come up over and over in the games. So let's say we're doing, I brought up sandstorms. So let's say we're traveling through the desert. So you can throw in heat exhaustion and sandstorms and regular physical exhaustion, and not finding food, not finding water, having a hard time finding shelter, finding an oasis, but it's surrounded by all kinds of dangers, whether it's quicksand or living creatures inside. They're trying to protect it, and then there are tribalists out there and such. By foreshadowing those things, even though the players may get the long rest, it might just be a minor risk. It's like the calm before the storm again. So maybe they do survive and get shelter from the sandstorm, but then after the sandstorm goes, now all the landmarks that they used are gone, covered with sand. Okay, maybe they get lost, and they're like, well, we don't want to get lost because it's going to take us that much longer to get somewhere. And I feel like travel, the point of having a harsh environment is because it, when you get to your destination, you're supposed to be exhausted and tired and injured and having lost allies and equipment and half of your horses and supplies. It's supposed to be a rough travel. So let's remember that, and something that we tend to forget, that 5th edition is designed to have 6 to 8 encounters per long rest. Now, most of us find it a little bit ridiculous to have 6 to 8 combats per long rest. It's a little bit, I mean, that's pretty much war. That's not even adventuring. That's war. That's literally like, dropping you out of a plane into a battlefield. Like that's where 6 to 8 combats happen per long rest. That's per day. That's crazy. So instead, what you could insert are encounters. And an encounter doesn't even need to be with something living. An encounter could be crossing a steep ridge and then finding out that there's a raging river, and then finding out that there's tall grasses, and then there's swampy, mud flats or something, and then there's a ravine that you have to cross, and then and now we fight a troll. And then after fighting the troll, now there's a lack of food and water, and then there's brambles somewhere, and there's a herd of bison, coming by. Throw in all kinds of things to spread out the combat encounters, but still have dangerous encounters. And those encounters could very simply be reskinned traps, reskinned spell effects, reskinned puzzles and layer actions, and reskinned all kinds of things. Hell, you could reskin a bunch of creatures. Reskin a living ooze and just make it a pit of acid or something. Reskin that fire elemental and it's just it's belching flames from a volcano. You reskin an ice storm spell because it just happens to be a blizzard out. Like, you can reskin those things and make them organic into your world, so that the players feel like there's dangers out there, feel that they can use some of those skills that are unused, and then still you're quote unquote using the rules in the game to round out your world without necessarily having to have yet one more monster encounter.
Yeah. I don't think I could have put it better myself. So I think that's probably a really, really good way to end this episode. So thank you, everybody who has tuned in this evening, or whether you're watching it in the future. Thank you very much. And stay tuned. There's lots more help action on the way. And DBJ, it's been an honor and a privilege, sir, and I mean that. Thank you very much for coming on and for asking to come on. I was incredibly flattered, and it was a joy to have you come on and talk about this kind of stuff with you. So why don't you give the people an outro, say goodbye, tell them where they can find you, and we'll put a bow on it.
Sure. Okay. I'm over at RPG with DBJ. It's my YouTube channel. You can type in DBJ or Davae Breon Jaxon, if you remember to spell it, into and do some little Google searching. You'll find me out there somewhere or something. I do a demi-daily deep dive each day at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's demi-daily because every once in a while I'll get dinged by YouTube over something silly. But that being said, it's normally just it's like my coffee in the morning. I am a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing, and my baby, my little brainchild is the Cinematic Environs. Little plug there, but anyway, it's my contribution to this small publications in the RPG community, basically making books that are deal with nothing but the environment. I'm hoping this year to finish every environment, and then we're going to put out a compendium with the entire thing, hardback and everything. So I can't wait for it. But so that's a slight plug. I mean, there's some people who are waiting for it. The ones left are subterranean battlefields, cityscapes, and forests, and then jungles and swamps is probably going to be combined together. And so yeah, the big plug. These are a bunch of them that are already in existence. There's some pretty actually. There's a couple of here. I know I'm plugging something here, but this was a big challenge for me, and I took the challenge. This is Plains and Grasslands. And it's got a little thickness to it. I think it's like 64 pages of nothing but that flat, boring expanse of place between the castles and the all the dangerous areas. I was like, there's got to be something in flat air. Like, what the hell happens in the plains? Nothing. And I was like, no. There's got to be something. So I mean, hell, there's like there's pets and mounts and familiars and combat for that. So there's a if you want to use mounted combat, you can use that. And we have a survival book that actually has was curbed from real survival techniques. We even have like rations in it for different racial types and stuff, for goblins and tieflings and all. It's really silly, but yeah, it's oh man, I'm so addicted to it. So it's coming soon. So thank you very much. If you stuck this long through Help Action, please take a look at the rest of the live plays on Erasmus Expeditions, and you can check my channel out. Whatever, do a click. You'll see the dude with the dreads and the colorful headbands. Normally I have a backdrops behind me, but I decided, I was like, I'm gonna let it go. This is my movie room. I've got like Marilyn Monroe over this side, and like and then there's like the Avengers over there, tickets and stuff, X-Men behind me, you know. So I love it all, and so thank you very much for having me on your show. I hope I can be a positive influence in the RPG community, and I'm just happy to be here.
It's a proper nerd room. And I love it. I'm jealous over several of the posters. I've been kind of looking at them throughout the conversation we've been having, and yeah. I think it's pretty easy to say, DBJ, without a doubt, that you are a positive influence on this community. I know you have been for me, so it honestly has been. It's been a goal of mine to try to play with you, and it's not one that we've managed to accomplish yet. But I am certain that now that I've got my foot in the door, I'll be able to get you into a game, or get into a game with you at least at some point in the near future.
Yeah, I'm easy to approach. I just private message me, ping me, hit me up on Facebook, whatever. Write a comment in one of my videos, and I'll probably get back with you. I'm real easy to approach. That's all. Ask me questions. Ask me about anything. Talk about anything. Especially, you know, I've gotten a lot of questions about publishing, actually, which is kind of funny. But yeah, it's a goal. I happen to be far more blessed in the RPG community than I had ever hoped. So I'm just trying to spread that out to other people and bring them up with me.
All you can do, man. And I appreciate it. So everyone, yeah, sure. Everyone, thank you very, very much for tuning in this evening. And until next time, may your dice roll high and your snacks always be within reach.